and welcome to Crosstalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. The politics of values. Should Muslim women be allowed to wear the burqa in public places? Some claim this is a free form of expression. Others see it as a symbol of oppression. To discuss this controversial issue, which is very high on the agenda in France, I'm joined by Anne-Elisabeth Moutet in Paris. She's an executive director of the Rousseau Institute. In London, we have Douglas Murray. He's a director of the Center for Social Cohesion and another member of our Crosstalk team, Yelena Hanga. All right, folks, Crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want. First, I'd like to go to Paris. There are 5 million Muslims in France, and 0.038% wear the burqa. What's all the fuss about?
Well, the fuss is that even 5 years ago, you had about 1/3 or 1/4 of that number wearing the burqa, and it is growing exponentially. The burqa is not something that is a characteristic of the Muslim population of France. The Muslim population of France comes mostly from the Maghreb. The burqa is something that is imported from Saudi Arabia and from the Wahhabite Salafist movement. And it is something that is new and that is half the time actually worn by converts. And it is something that is the expression of an extremist, fundamentalist strain of Islam with political ambitions.
So, Anne-Elisabeth, is this a preventative measure? Because that's what it sounds like, with such a small amount of the population participating in this form of clothing. I mean, preventative? Because it's still such a tiny part of the population. And how do you know? And how do you know these people didn't choose? These women didn't choose the burqa themselves. How do we know that?
Well, you know, these women didn't used to wear it, and they're wearing it now, and they wear it because they have been catechized, if I can use the expression. They have been brainwashed, I would say, by a number of imported imams and the people who believe in this sort of extremist creed that didn't used to exist here. And most of these women have no way of expressing themselves anymore because they can't speak outside of the presence of a brother or a husband or a father. Actually, you can't see their faces anymore. They are no longer part of society. But that is more a question of principle. As you know, we've passed in France in 2004 a very successful bill to forbid the wearing the hijab, which is the headscarf, in schools. And it's only in schools and in the civil service. It means that if you're a girl and you're a student and you're presumably above 18 and you're an adult, if you want to wear the hijab at university, it is not illegal. But the idea is something that is at the heart of the French Republic principles, and that is the neutrality of the public space.
Okay, we'll go back to that. I'd like to go to London. I'd like to go to London here. There's a very large Muslim community in the UK. From the British perspective, is France overreacting to this?
It's hard to sum up any single British perspective on this issue. Like most countries in Western Europe and indeed across the world, people, indeed our government, is very conflicted about it. I don't think there's any likelihood of Britain having a ban on the burqa. We actually have, by the way, percentage-wise, a smaller proportion of our population are Muslim than in France. So one could say that it's a keener issue higher up the political agenda for very obvious reasons in France. But there is something which has to be sort of stated early on here, which is that the burqa debate does tend to concentrate solely on the rights of people to dress in the way they wish to and so on. There is something else which Britain has already been at the forefront of, which is the burqa actually as a security problem. You may remember the 7th of July 2005 underground suicide bombs in London. 2 weeks later, there was an attempt on the 21st of July to do another 4 suicide bombings on London's tubes and buses. And one of the unsuccessful, as it were, suicide bombers fled the capital in a burqa. Now, I think it's worth just sort of throwing this in at the very outset, because this is actually more than just about the right of women to wear what they may or may not want to wear. It's also a debate about our most fundamental right, which is our right not to be blown up on a tube train.
Well, okay, if I can go back to Paris here. I mean, a lot of people say this is ending up being a vicious circle. People feel marginalized, and when they feel marginalized, they are looking for their own identity. because of the social circumstances in France, we have more people moving to more traditional, if we want to call it that way, to defend their identity. I mean, isn't it a broader social issue as well? Because it's just about values, the way it's couched right now.
I think you've got it completely wrong.
Go right ahead.
I think you've got it completely wrong. It's the whole idea that, it's social misery that forces people into extremist stances. But we know that every instance of terrorist arrested were actually middle-class people with no many problems who went to very good universities in our countries. And in the case of the women who wear the burqa right now, half of them, as I said, are converts, and they have the convert's fascination for this. But the other thing is that the tiny minority of activists who wear the burqa are actually helping marginalize the large majority of peaceful Muslims who live in France and who do not need this kind of stigmatization. I think it was Douglas who was just talking a minute ago about the terrorist or would-be terrorist escaping in a burqa. Last weekend in Paris, we've had a bank robbery with the robbers coming dressed in burqas.
Yeah, but that's not terror. That's not terror. That's not terrorism. Okay, that was a get-up. Okay, it could have been a lot of other things here.
It threatens security.
But this whole focus. Go, Douglas. Go right ahead.
Come on. Douglas. It's not just about terrorism. It's about whether or not people are part of a society and whether or not they're allowed to hide themselves away from a society. The reason why opportunistic terrorists, or in the case of the recent case, bank robbers, would try to dress in this way is because they know they can get away with dressing this way. When I go into my bank, if I've come on a motorcycle, I have to take off my motorcycle helmet. I wouldn't be allowed to go into my bank if I were wearing a balaclava. There are whole sections of our culture already where there are certain places where you need to show your face. People use the burqa, are increasingly using the burqa in order to hide themselves.
So in both your countries, people of Islam are not discriminated against, right?
No, I think that's absolutely right, yes.
Well, then again,
what discrimination do you think there is?
Jobs, joblessness, access
you honestly
to social...
saying the British...
No, what I'm saying is that...
Hang on.
What I'm...
Are you honestly saying the British Muslims
if you want me to say
jobs?
what I want to say, then let me say it, all right? My point is that a lot of people feel marginalized. They will go towards their own religion for their own identity. I don't think that's illogical. No. And I'm not saying, and why does it have to always be extreme? Both of you make it sound like it's, people that are secular and terrorists. That's how this argument is being couched.
No, pardon me. You did, that wasn't what you said at all. You've made several different points.
Go ahead, Douglas.
What you said, first of all, was you asked whether or not Muslims are prejudiced against in my country. I think there are all sorts of personal prejudices which people have, including Muslims against other Muslims and Muslims against non-Muslims. But you specifically said about getting jobs and things. There is no evidence, and I don't think any serious, credible person could make any up, that Muslims in this country don't get jobs. Muslims in this country tend to have come from the Pakistani regions, and they tend to be on the lower socio-economic stratas of society. That's because new recent immigrant groups always end up there when they first arrive, and it takes a few generations for that to change. I don't think you're right in pursuing the idea that, as it were, there is innate anti-Muslim feeling in Britain, because that certainly isn't evident on the ground.
There is Islamophobia in Britain, yes, and in France as well. Yes or no?
What on earth do you mean?
Yes or no? Is there not Islamophobia in France and in Britain?
I've got to answer you because you just used a totally crocked word. There is no such thing as Islamophobia.
All right, you guys, one at a time. Okay.
There is no such thing as Islamophobia. Islamophobia, the word you've just used, you use it as if everyone's agreed that there is such a thing. There is racism in society which people tackle and try to fight against, and many of us spend a lot of our lives arguing that people should not feel such racism. But Islamophobia, which is the word you've just used, is an entirely new term. It's been around for about 10 years. Nobody can agree on what it means. Most people who throw around the accusation of Islamophobia effectively mean anything that any single individual Muslim at any time finds offensive. Many people would think it was Islamophobic if I said that I don't think